Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, All in Crypto, and today I am both excited and delighted to have Flavio from Polimec on the show to talk to us about what they are doing in regards to fundraising and tackling that arena when it is related to the Web3. So welcome on board, Flavio. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, really looking forward to getting into what we have to talk about, certainly in relation to Polimec and the space more broadly and some of the barriers that you guys are breaking down for the masses, I guess. You know, there's this term thrown around when it comes to Polimec in regards to people becoming a VC, perhaps. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm sure we'll get into it all. So with everyone that I have on the show, I always like to start off with them. I like to kind of introduce my audience to the person that they're speaking to. So if you could just give us a brief introduction into yourself and how you ended up in the crypto space, that would be amazing.
Sure. Yeah. So Flavio here from Polimec. Again, thank you for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
Yeah, how I ended up in the crypto space. That's the question everyone is asking, right? I think so. My background is in traditional finance. So I'm from Switzerland. You know, banks and finance are quite big here. So my start was in equity sales for a US investment bank. Back then it was called Piper Jeffries. Now I think it's called Piper Sanders. And I was an intern and I got my start, you know, basically when I was 18, just first time, hey, now I'm allowed to invest. I'm allowed to be part of this world, but I have no idea, right? So that's how I started getting educated about finance and about basically, well, secondary markets or like just equity markets. And, you know, it was quite an interesting time. I think it was during the Trump presidency when he was trying to become president. So it was, you know, a lot of stuff happening. And then from equity sales, I basically saw everything. So I went into derivatives or structured products brokerage, which again is a very specific niche in traditional finance. Then also to venture capital, where I basically worked at the venture capital fund. Well, it was becoming a fund before it was direct sales or direct investing, which basically means on one side you need to source the deals, and then on the other side you need to present it to your group of investors. So it's like you're doing both sides, which was very interesting, but also very challenging. And then also in a private debt fund. So I think covered quite a lot of traditional finance before I then decided that, you know, I was privately already quite interested in crypto since like beginning 2017. You know, it was very loud. Everyone was talking about it. I wanted to know more. I wanted to be involved, to make my own experiences and be able to judge, you know, like, is this something that is interesting for me? I don't really come from like a super technical background. So the technology for me was interesting, but it was secondary, right? It was much more like the vision and how can you basically then use its technology long-term to change things. And I ended up starting working at a Swiss crypto broker that has been around since 2013. So wow. Yeah, I think one of the oldest ones, most people will probably know it. But I started there and then I was part of the institutional services and products team. So institutional services, meaning we were basically doing sales for institutional investors. So trying to onboard, you know, banks, asset managers, funds, but also ultra high net worth individuals. And then on the product side, we were also in charge of certain things like AMCs or, you know, providing vehicles and products to then also trade, well, crypto. And yeah, so basically that's sort of how I got into crypto from a professional sense. And yeah, we've had a lot of fun experiences. That's also where I met big chunk of the team that we are today and never looked back.
Fantastic. So there's quite a few of you that have sort of merged over from the traditional sort of financial world into the crypto space and are obviously looking to facilitate what Polimec are doing. I feel like finance, you know, there's a lot of, when you kind of understand the financial landscape of things, you kind of understand the world a little bit more. I think that there's such a correlation between finance and the world that most people just really don't have much of a clue about, yet it's such an integral part of everything. I mean, you talk about derivatives. Derivatives kind of are the biggest market really in regards to markets generally. And I think everybody, I think, should have some sort of a basic understanding in regards to how all of this works, because you'll kind of get a broader understanding of just how the world is structured. I don't know if you found that at all. Did you find a kind of world opening up to you when you got into the financial space? And of course, that would really help you out in regards to the position you're in now.
That's a great question. Just a little side story, because I was getting a haircut like 2 weeks ago or something, and my hairdresser, I was talking to her about, yeah, crypto is 24/7, it's craziness, it never stops. And then I was basically had to give her a quick introduction into like, hey, what is blockchain, what is crypto, right? And I was doing this discourse of, super basic financial basics, right? Like how do banks work, right? What is money, right? What is money? Most people, they never think about that, right? Like it's just, I pay my rent, I go get my groceries, and I get paid every month. Like that's money. So for me, it really helped to understand on one side, why are things happening in the world? Like it gives you a perspective, macroeconomic perspective of a global economy, but also politics, right? Because everything is money, right?
Yep.
Money is the essence of everything. And money can be many things, but yeah, for me, definitely that was quite the eye opener, and to have seen so many different sides of it, right? On the top level, it's about making more money, right? But if you look deeper, you will understand the dynamics of how everything works together. For me, that's super interesting, especially because it means you are able to position yourself strategically, depending on what you believe will happen in the future or will impact the future, right? So yeah,
Yeah, I think there's
quite a
yeah.
game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's this kind of great game of the rich get rich and the poor get poorer, and I think a lot of that has to do because they kind of understand. I talk about the upper kind of echelons. They really have an understanding of how this great game works, and a lot of people don't. And I feel like if they did, and I think crypto, in many regards, is kind of bridging that gap, because it's kind of forcing people to get educated in regards to the financial landscape that we're all forced to play, whether we like it or not. Was there an aha moment when you first got into crypto? You talk about 2017. Was there an aha moment? Because for me, it was looking at Bitcoin and saying, okay, we've all seen that meme. Person Googles the Federal Reserve and then Googles, how do I buy Bitcoin? And I think that's quite a true route that a lot of people go down. They start with Bitcoin and then they kind of, a world opens up where you go, hang on a minute, this idea of a distributed ledger doesn't just apply to an alternative money or store of value. You can apply this to anything like fundraising, like what you guys are doing, or what Kilt Protocol is doing in regards to identity, or any of the kind of financial instruments that are now being tokenized, or whatever it may be. Was there an aha moment for you when you got into the crypto space?
It's interesting. The thing is, I believe there's many reasons why someone goes into the crypto space, and I think it's sometimes wrong to assume that people want to get educated or they want to learn about something. I think this curiosity is not for everyone, and that's okay. That's totally fine. For me specifically, I saw, or I enjoyed the idea of, hey, how can we remove intermediaries, right? Because on one side, you create something that people don't like, and that's accountability, right? Responsibility. You need to handle your own ledger now, right? You are responsible not to lose your seed phrase or your keys, right? But on the other side, it gives you choice. It gives you the power to decide and to take action and to, know, right? To have this transparency and to know what's happening with your money or your stake or whatever it is, right? This idea really spoke to me, and being able to remove intermediaries. I don't think intermediaries in general are bad. I think in a lot of sense, they make life easier for a lot of people. But it's always a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off between what makes your life easier and how much are you willing to pay for it, right? Or how much risk are you willing to take? And then once you go deeper into like this, triple ledger accounting and into super deep tech of like, hey, how does this actually work? You understand that you can create a system that cannot be broken, right? A system that can withstand anything, that can bring stability and new opportunities. And I think that's also what I believe is very interesting, right? We always speak from traditional finance and from crypto. In my opinion, they're not that different if you look at it from a financial perspective, right? Obviously, there's much more action in one of them, or one of them is much bigger, but it's sort of the same. But in the end, it's like, it gives you new opportunities, right? You're the first one to do something. And where else can you be the first to do something? Like, everything has been done before, right?
Yep.
And this excitement of being able to build, of having new great technology, interesting people, right? Because yeah, I mean, if you look back at like the cypherpunk movement and the origin of crypto, you know, it's quite interesting. I'm not saying it speaks to me 100%, but I understand it, and I understand the origins, and I understand why some people are the way they are. And it's also what basically allows us to push and have the audacity of like, hey, you know, just because something has been established for many years, doesn't mean we cannot change the status quo. And I think we just have, you know, the audacity to do that. And that's really fun, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there's a real social element to the crypto space broadly. You know, the origins and stuff like that. Because I think sort of talking about the origins, and depending on what kind of origin trail you want to go down, the Satoshi narrative is one that I think is going to be one of the biggest mysteries of our lifetime. You know, I don't think there's anyone that has a definitive answer there. I'm sure somebody somewhere does, but you know, there's lots of great takes on it. You know, who is it? Is it Hal Finney? Who was somebody? And I always say this to Bitcoin maximalists. I always say Hal Finney himself was actually a big advocate for the further application of a distributed ledger, a global ledger. He said Bitcoin is a global ledger. There's many applications for this, and hence, you know, we've gone from Bitcoin to 10,000 altcoins or something along those lines that all kind of maybe have a distributed ledger attached somewhere, at least on the face of it. Let's talk about how Polimec are actually furthering the industry with what they're doing. And maybe we should start with a really sort of broad and simplistic kind of overview of what Polimec actually is.
Yeah, maybe let me take a step back to, you know, when I did my introduction, I said I used to work for this broker, and our team was part of this ISP, institutional and services and products team. One of the big things that we did was something called private sales, right? So what is a private sale? Well, it basically means you have, in that case, a crypto startup that is looking for funding, right? And in return for that funding, at some point, they will build their own chain, and there might be tokens that you will receive in reward, right? As a reward, basically. And our job was to do due diligence on those projects and be able to, you know, evaluate them and be able to judge, do they have any perspective in the future, like a positive perspective of how the future will look like, and is their solution something that could have potential to succeed in the solution in the future. And on the other side was then also to find investors and basically do so something that we call soft sounding, which basically means like, hey, if there was this opportunity to invest in something like this, how much would you like to invest? Would you be interested, right? So that you get a feeling of, is there even interest in the market? And so facilitating those deals was a big part of our job that we've done quite successfully. And it also showed us the flaws of it, right? So, you know, it means, hey, a lot of manual work, a lot of time that is being invested, right? A lot of education, a lot of technical implementations. So all the things that we saw, and then also not to even talk about the gatekeeping, right? Because this was usually always like a small group of people that was able to invest. But all those things that we gathered really helped us to understand, like, hey, there needs to be some change here. And instead of just complaining, like everyone else likes to do, we're like, hey, yeah, let's do something about it, right? Why not? If we're not going to do it, nobody else will. And then how did I get into Polimec? Well, so Luca von Wittenbach, which is one of our co-founders, was my boss at this broker. And yeah, it was quite an interesting dynamic, also from our team. And he was basically introduced to Polimec, to this idea that was originally, you know, brought up by Kilt, of having basically, well, a polkadot liquidity mechanism, so a mechanism that is able to do basically token distribution, right? And really liked this idea, and we really saw like, hey, you can do much more than just that. And then yeah, it's now, I think it's almost 2 years since then we joined together, everyone, and I think in June it's going to be 2 years since we established the foundation, and since that we never look back, basically. So that's like the story of how it started. I know I'm diverting. I just
No,
realized
no.
your initial question was very different. But and so what are we today? What did we build the last 2 years, right? So basically, we like to call it fundraising infrastructure. Right? Infrastructure because everyone can use it. Fundraising because our primary focus is to facilitate fundraising for early stage startups in the Web3 ecosystem. So again, you have both sides. As I mentioned before, you have the investor and you have the project. And we want to create this infrastructure where they can meet and where the entire fundraise is facilitated in like a streamlined process. But there's a lot of differentiators, which I know we might go into a bit later. But that's like the primary focus. What we want to build is to give you a choice of, hey, I don't want to go through this manual process. I don't want to be exposed to only a certain amount of people. I don't want to be leveraged upon because I don't have a choice, right? And this choice is basically what we want to provide. I'm sorry, I talk a lot.
No, no, no. You know, that was all. I really like to get a feel, because whenever there's a problem, people can even complain about that problem, but what they really should be doing was looking for a solution. So whenever a problem pops up, there's always some sort of kind of a market that can often form around that. And I feel like that's exactly what you guys have done. You know, you've really seized an opportunity in regards to utilizing this technology to facilitate what was a very kind of gate kept and guarded and complex, and kind of there was more hurdles in the way than there really needed to be, and everything wasn't quite streamlined. I feel like Polimec has really kind of streamlined this whole process and opened it up to everyone, instead of perhaps accredited investors or whatever it may be that only kind of had access to these kind of, can we call them deals? Could we use that terminology? What would you prefer to use?
So in theory, it's a primary market transaction. If you want to use the financial term, we can call it a private sale or a deal, right? That is provided to participate in a project. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the best kind of, if we use the term deal here, is where both sides benefit. And I think that's what Polymech is doing an amazing job of. You know, it's kind of connecting somebody who perhaps wants to be a bit of a venture capitalist, wants to invest in newer projects that are looking to launch, and it's benefiting them in that way. But it's also benefiting the people that are looking for liquidity, looking to launch, and doing that through this vehicle. So it truly is interesting. Let's talk about Launchpads, because you guys call yourself a kind of fundraising platform. Could we maybe differentiate a little bit? Because I have heard of Launchpads before, which is this kind of, it's a similar idea, but there are some differences here. In fact, there's quite a few differences. Could we maybe differentiate between Polymec as a kind of fundraising protocol in regards to some of the Launchpads that are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can start. Why do we not like the term? Because the term basically indicates that the launch platform itself, right? It gives you something to lift off of, but then you're on your own, right? So good luck after you've launched, right? Because then you're no longer our problem. And that's not really how we want to basically view this, or how we view this in general. That's why we don't like the term, right? And also because it's affiliated with a lot of negative experiences people have made, which brings me to the next thing, which is basically one of the big differentiators is that launchpads usually are centralized.
Yes.
So it means there's a corporation behind it that owns the launchpad, and the corporation has employees, they have offices, they need to pay salaries. And in order to pay salaries, they need to charge you something, right? And because they don't want to take the risk, and because they want as many people as possible to raise funds, they basically tell you, hey, you need to pay an upfront fee in fiat. So fiat meaning in dollar or euro, Swiss francs, whatever, right? Because we don't want to take the risk. And on the hindsight, in the back, yeah, we'll take some tokens, right? That's one big thing. Why is that problematic? Because, well, it's a pay-to-win structure, right? So it basically means there's a small group of people that owns this company that their incentive is to make paid salaries and to grow. And for that, they are incentivized to let in as many people as possible, or at least the ones who pay the most, right? So that's this pay-to-win structure. Now, if you're a small startup that maybe, you don't have a lot of experience in raising funds, or let's say you are very technically gifted and you can create amazing products, but you're not good at business development, what does that mean for you? Well, either you don't have the money to pay for it, or you might not be able to have a good deal there. right? Because you might pay too much. You might not know how to structure this deal, right? Or you might not even have a choice. So that's like one part of it. So there's no really this, what we want to bring is the incentive alignment, right? Where you, as someone that is raising funds and someone that is investing into those projects, have an incentive alignment as well as everyone else. So Polimec is decentralized, which basically means that we, which if I say we, it's the Polimec Foundation, our job is to basically build the protocol and act in the best interest of the protocol. But we don't decide, right? So the community decides who is raising funds, who can raise funds, why should they? Okay, let's put our money where our mouth is, right? And you create this dynamic where you actually have this filter of enabling projects that the community want to get a shot at, to get this shot, right? To get this shot to get funding, which then also means they can build, which means they can hire people, right? So to fulfill their vision, and that's sort of like this big key differentiator. Then also going beyond the fundraise, I think, is also something that we really want to emphasize, which is like, hey, we're not just bringing together two parties and like, hey, you want to invest, you want money, like, here we go, now the deal is signed, right? But it's about much deeper understanding of what does it take to launch a project, right? Like, what are your tokenomics? Tokenomics are very important. Tokenomics can make or break you, right? Maybe you don't have experience in how to properly design the tokenomics of your project, which some people don't. Not going to talk about that, but
Yeah.
on the other on the other side, yeah, let's not talk about it. But on the other side, obviously, you also have then this approach of we don't know how to raise funds from people. So we really want to guide you through this entire process, which is on chain, right? Which means you don't need to trust us that we, keep any assets from investors, or that we will handle the deals here and we will do the bookkeeping. No, everything is on chain, right? Everything is transparent, which is also great for auditing, which is great for your taxes as well. Pay your taxes, very important.
Yep, absolutely.
Don't forget, it's March. So creating this value chain of, taking something as simple, or at least people think it's simple, as fundraising, and being like, hey, what actually entails this process of raising funds? How can we break it down? How can we make it easier for you? And how can we especially enable you to focus on what you should do, which is building, right? Nobody, like, there's not a lot of people that really know how to raise funds. Let's be honest. Everyone will tell you, I know this investor, I know this VC, oh, we're buddies. But when you need something from them, nothing happens, right? And there's a reason for it. So we don't want to leave this up to chance. We want to create this infrastructure that you have the best tech, then you should also get the funding from it, and the community should decide if that's the case, right?
Yeah,
there's many more things, but I think it's like this general idea, right?
Yeah, let's explore the kind of decentralized aspects of this and how the kind of process looks and who's in charge of that. Before I do that, I mean, I, like yourself, have been in the crypto space for a while. I could come up with, and I don't want to really go into too much detail on anyone's specifics, but I've known about sort of centralized launch pads and even ones that have claimed to be decentralized in the past. And the horror stories that I can tell in regards to a lot of them, not only in regards to actual investors getting screwed, but also the projects themselves. I know quite a few projects I can think of off the top of my head that have gone through traditional launch pads. They've been funded, and then instantly, once the project's gone live, the main backers, and it might be one or two individuals, some of them actually are known in the kind of crypto content space, but I won't go too much into detail in regards to that. They've then sold all the tokens instantly, and you've ended up with projects that just don't have a float anymore and that kind of crash and burn as a result of a ill put together kind of fundraising launchpad mechanism. So I'm totally on board with what you guys are doing, because I've seen the catastrophic effects that can come from, first of all, raising funds in the wrong kind of a manner, or in a kind of this motive of let's just get as much funds as possible for ourselves because we've got an incentive to do that. And then that's led to the destruction of both the investors and the actual projects themselves. So I'm totally on board with what you guys are doing. But let's explore this idea of decentralized a decentralized kind of fundraising protocol that is voted on. I assume the projects that you guys will list will be voted on by the community, and the community in this sense is the Polimec token holders, I believe. Could we sort of extend on that for people that
Sure.
are unfamiliar?
Sure. I mean, so why is that relevant? Well, because if we are centralized, it would mean that we can just decide this one can come in, this one can't, right? If we're not centralized, it means we need to create a mechanism where we incentivize people to only, quote unquote, basically allow good projects to raise funds, right? Good projects, whatever that means, that's subjective, that's different for everyone.
Of course.
But it's important that we have this filter. Now, how does that filter work? It works in a way, something that we call evaluations. So it's basically due diligence, and everyone is able to do a due diligence on a project, right? Because once you are on Polimec, maybe just to add, in order to see any information other than the name and maybe some basic stuff, you need something that is called a KYC credential, which we will probably go into a bit later. Yep. But let's say once you have this KYC credential, you can then sign an NDA in the app, which gives you access to the terms, right? Which is very important because this is not a public sale, it's a private sale, right? And then you can start doing your due diligence. What does that mean? Well, do you think this project has a chance of succeeding with what they are envisioning to do? Do you think the people behind the project are good-hearted people and they have the best intentions in mind, right? Do you think the valuation that you're looking at is something that speaks about the current market situation, but also about, hey, does that make sense, right? I mean, you can be my guest. You can go, you can open a basic apply and say you want to raise funds at $100 billion market cap valuation. You can do it. Nobody will give you any support, right? So it's about giving the community the power to judge. And then once you judge, you do something that we call, you bond your Polimec tokens, right? So in order to raise funds as a project, you need to reach a certain threshold of, it's not really commitments because you're not committing to then also invest, but it's much more of this soft sounding that I mentioned before, right? You ask people like, hey, what do you think of this? Do you think this is interesting? Would you be interested at some point to maybe invest, right? Can you show us your interest? How much, right? So that's called bonding, and it's a 10% threshold. So if you want to raise $1 million as a minimum, right, then you need to have this benchmark of 10% that needs to be reached, which is 100K, right? Once that's reached, it means that you are eligible to then enter into the funding round. Now, the intricate thing behind the system is that it's, again, incentive alignment, right? Because you could now say, yeah, but everyone can just chuck money in there and then they can go raise funds, right? Well, there are thresholds to then the funding round. So let's say if you reach certain thresholds, I'm not going to go into too many details. You can read it all yourself. But then you either, if you raise exactly what you want or more, that's great. Then the people who evaluated will receive rewards from your token, right? If you don't achieve your goals in certain stages, it either means you don't receive rewards or you'll even get slashed for the amount that you bonded in the beginning, right? So your soft sounding, or this commitment, which we call, gets slashed because it means, hey, you basically told everyone this is a good project that will be able to raise funds. For some reason, they were not able to raise funds. Now it means like, hey, why did you do that, right? So you start incentivizing people to actually do their job, right? And long term, it also means that you incentivize them that if they do a great job, they should get rewarded for it. So that this decentralization is much more than on a technical level. It's also creating a community that collectively has the power to decide which projects get to raise funds and which not. Which, if you look on a philosophical level, also means you decide which technology will come in the future. Because the ones that raise funds have a shot at trying. The ones that don't, they can go somewhere else and try their best, right? But that's like this entire idea of decentralization.
Yeah, brilliant. And I really love what you're doing there because you're promoting accountability. You know, if you want to take part in
It's
this, you've got to
crypto,
be accountable. Yeah, this is what it's all
right?
about, you know? Yeah, absolutely. So I love the kind of mechanisms that I often always get asked, well, why does this project have a token, or why does that project have a token? Well, Bitcoin kind of it solved many problems, but one of the things that people kind of forget was that if you didn't have the BTC token, nobody would maintain the network. I say nobody, I'm sure some people would. But it's the same with a project like Polimec. It's the same with a project, you know, whatever projects it may be. What's actually been solved here is actually how do you incentivize things like honesty, you know, participation, trust, all this kind of stuff that there's gray areas with, but the tokens themselves play a vital role actually in the whole operation of everything. And it was a kind of problem that was solved. Um, you know, I don't know if Bitcoin necessarily spawned the entire movement, but certainly kick things off. And we see Polymet kind of down the road of that, tackling this kind of fundraising issue. And talking about the issues of fundraising, we're going to come to KYC and KML a little bit later, because I know you guys are partnered with Deloitte, I believe, and Kilt Protocol. But before we get on to that, I want to talk about a little bit more about, so people really understand the barriers that you guys are breaking down in regards to the traditional world of fundraising, and how what you guys are doing kind of breaks those barriers down and enables people to, I used that term at the start, become their own VCs. And people look at VCs with a real negative slant in the crypto space, I feel. However, you wouldn't have a lot of the projects or really the size of the cryptocurrency space today without those venture capitalists taking the risks. Not all of them are good people. Some are, and they're just genuinely being a venture capitalist. So let's talk a little bit about the traditional kind of way that fundraising happens, and, you know, how you guys differ and have broken down a lot of those
Mm-hmm.
barriers.
Yeah, I think important to mention is, you know, this I am the VC movement. I think it's quite symbolical, but
Yep,
I think VCs are super important, right?
absolutely.
We also have a lot of VCs that want to basically participate on Polymec. I'll go a bit into more detail after why that is, right? But the thing is that you need everyone, right? And every project needs a different kind of investor, because it doesn't mean that this is the first round that you've raised, right? It can be that you've already raised money from large investors, but now it's important to them to diversify. You want to have more token holders, right? Because that's important, because otherwise, you know, in the end, you're the only one holding the token, right? You want the foundation. There's no market for it. So what the issues I see, or that we see with the traditional market, specifically in fundraising, is access, gatekeeping, whatever you want to call it, right? Because the juiciest deals are always kept in small circles. And this especially applies early on, right? Because usually, yeah, that's, I like to do this timeline of, like, you have the secondary market, which is where tokens are traded. Then you have this big gate, and then you have the primary market. And in the primary market, you have like the big rounds, like, you know, Series G, F, whatever, where you have then private equity, and then at some point you go to venture capital, then you go to angel investors, right? And then you go probably family and friends, because that's where it all starts mostly, right?
Yep.
And the further back you go, the more risk you take, but also the bigger the opportunity, right? And the further back you go, or let's say this entire space, especially if you look at the beginning from private equity to venture capital, those where the sizes are, but a lot of the risk is already out, because you mostly already have some form of product. But that's the most difficult space to get into, because for many reasons. First of all, who is doing the fundraising, right? So either it's the project itself, if they're lucky enough to have someone on board that is doing the fundraising, or they engage someone to do it, right? Or like an investor, someone else. What's your idea? Well, I need money. I need money. I need to pay bills. I need money. I don't care. I need money, right? So what are you going to do? Hey, who has money? Okay, I see these big corporations. They all have money. They're investing. I want to get money from them, right? Which puts you in a situation where you have the smaller lever, right? You're like, hey, please give me money. Please invest. We're the best. We're going to change the world, right? And it creates this dynamic that you are super exposed to them, and without the support of one VC, it's very difficult to get the support of another, right? Because they're clever. It's a smart game they play, right? Oh, so who already invested? Tell me. Is there another VC? Oh, okay, I feel more comfortable now. Good, let's do it, right? So that's like this entire idea of why does it take 9 to 12 months, 16 months to raise funds, right? It's because markets change. Nobody will ever tell you no, right? Because at some point they might be interested. So it drains you out, right? And sometimes you just need funding now, or at least in a short period of time. You don't have 1 year to wait. So that's where we see this entire structure of like, hey, if you don't have access on one side as a project, where do you get funding from, right? The other side is also, if you get the funding, what are the terms? Is it a valuation where they push you down? Is it something where you are even able to succeed in the future based on your tokenomics, right? Because if you look at crypto tokenomics, and that's also a big differentiator between traditional markets and crypto, you cannot compare that, right? 100% of the issuance is not the value of your company, right? Because usually you have a treasury, you have foundation reserves, right? You have vesting periods, you have tokens that are vest. Hopefully, I would advise everyone to do that. I don't do advice, no financial advice. But so that's super important to understand, right? And if then you are able to raise funds, which usually, there's a minimum ticket size they want to do and a maximum valuation, and you don't have a choice, then you're going to do it. And you're done from the beginning, right? So you don't even get a fair shot, because down the road, you will see the problem, right? So I think that's the issue that we see on the how to get funds. And on the other side, I mean, if I ask you now, for example, would you have loved to invest in Airbnb in 2013?
For sure, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes, I'll sell everything. Like,
yep,
can I sell my
100%.
hoodie? Like, take my money, right?
Take my crypto.
Hey,
no,
like,
I'm joking.
Literally, right?
Yep.
But it's like, so, but nobody ever called you.
No.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know, but I don't assume, right?
No, I can vouch. I definitely didn't get a call from anybody back then. Yeah.
And why didn't they call you? Because, well, they didn't know you existed. They didn't know you were interested, right? And because, it's easier to go to one party and hopefully we get our financial situation sorted from that party compared to many different parties, right? But for you, it means that what you do is, once it's listed somewhere, you will buy it. And then you think like, oh my God, I finally got my hands on Airbnb. I'm a big baller now, right? I only up from here. And you don't realize that most of the performance is already done.
Yep.
Right? Because that's how fundraising works, right? And then you create a secondary market, and at some point, in traditional finance, they just sell on the secondary market, right? And that's something that we believe doesn't create a sustainable narrative for your company or for your project, right? Because you should be able, the most mistakes people make are in the beginning, but you only see the aftermath after time, right? And being able to avoid those mistakes is so important, because it creates the opportunity for you to become a sustainable success at some point, right? Obviously, you need to deliver, but it gives you a shot. And I think that's like the issues that we see with this entire fundraising structure. I mean, if you can raise funds from a big VC and they give you a lot of money, like, hey, well done, like, do it, right? But not everyone has the luxury for that, right?
No.
Especially if you look at the bear market. Hey, raising funds in a bear market is probably one of the hardest things you can do, right? You can go down with your valuation, yeah, but what does it cost you, right? In long term. So I think this is like this idea of power that is held by a few. It's like crypto, right? And we want to distribute this power and give access and opportunity and decision power to the people. And to the people, we mean, in our case, Polimec token holders, and also the projects, right? They should be able to decide who they want to raise funds from. They should be able to decide what's best for them, what kind of structures do they want, right? Because they would know best. If they need help, they can get it, right? So I think this is like this entire basic idea, which gets much more complicated if we go into the different verticals.
Yeah, and like I say, I do always think the best deal is one where everyone benefits. You've got the people that are looking to invest or potentially step into that VC arena. Lots of barriers have been broken down for them that actually enables them to do exactly that. You've got the projects. Again, the horror stories that I've heard are just unbelievable. I've even been in close relationships with projects that had sort of let me in a little bit on how the sort of funding and things like that had went and what the aftermath of that was. And the aftermath was those projects aren't here today, and the people that were on board with it they're no longer even in the industry. So you've got all that
maybe,
element of things. Yeah.
sorry, maybe just to add on to that, because it's a good point that you mentioned, right? It's aligning the interests.
Yep.
And a lot of investors, they believe, I want the lowest possible valuation because it means I can invest either less or I get more tokens. That's great, right? But the important thing is to understand that sometimes raising at a higher valuation long term is the best for everyone, right? Because it allows the project to have this long runway, to have this sustainability of being able to sell more tokens over time, right? And it allows you basically to get more performance, or at least, I mean, this is not again, doesn't need to happen, but it's much more like you give it more of a chance of having a long-term success. And yeah, exactly what you mentioned, right? You get in at a low valuation, you're the king for 3 months, and then, oh no, I lost it all.
Yeah. Getting more coins of something that's worth zero is not really getting more of anything. It's kind of, so not that things necessarily will go that way. I also want to add something as well in regards to benefits, more broadly, not just in regards to Polimec and the projects that go through that, but in regards to the crypto space as a whole and actually bringing the masses to it. Because you mentioned bear markets and how hard things are to fund. I know firsthand how hard things are to get off the ground in a bear market. Nobody's really interested. There's a few, but they're all kind of, it becomes quite slim pickings. If you think about what's really going to drive value into the crypto space, it's builders. And those builders, in many regards, can only be enabled if they have the backing to enable them to do that. And what Polimec is doing is playing this really vital role of facilitating the next use case for crypto that might bring that 1 billion users in. I always look at the internet. I think there's a lot of comparables and a lot of differences in regards to Web 2 and Web 3, if we want to term it that, or the internet, and we could call it the internet of value, whatever we're doing here. And one thing I always think of is when the internet started, it really only took off once people had come on and built the applications that now we see people spending 10 hours a day watching cat memes on, like YouTube, for example. Crypto is still in this if you look at average users of dApps and things like that, a dApp is very lucky and in the top couple of percentile if they have 10,000 users. So I think Polimec is playing this bigger part in actually enabling builders to build applications, chain, whatever it may be, that will actually enable the masses into crypto. And I think I love that about what you guys are doing. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, maybe.
Yeah, I think, if there's no product, then there's no case, right? Yep. And we're super early. Like, just because we've been in crypto many years, and years in crypto, they go much faster, and I feel like I'm 50 years old right now. Yeah. But
I had a full head of hair when I started this journey.
Anyway, still doing great for now. But yeah. I think the important thing is to understand, hey, there's so many opportunities out there to build and to create and to improve and innovate. And we're so early, and we're in such a bubble, right? Because crypto it's huge.
Yep.
But if you compare it as we like to the derivative or even the real estate market, it's nothing. It's nothing, right? And yep. I don't think you can judge it just by its value or by the price, but it's also about how many people in your life don't know about crypto. Like every family dinner or every friend's birthday, it's the same discussion, right? So what are you doing? And then I'm always like, let me
here we go.
let me warm up.
Yeah.
Here we go, right? Yeah. My time to shine, right? And understanding that is very important, but also understanding that opportunities fade quicker. You need to be able to act very quickly, and quickly for me means take your time building, but you should be able to have the right resources for it, and you should be able to perform. And a lot of it, if you like it or not, is done by having funding. Yeah. Right? If you have more funding, it means you have more choices that you can make. You can hire someone. You can outsource things, right? There's a lot of things you can do. It also means it gives you more runway. So you have more time to survive, to launch, basically, or beyond launch, hopefully. And understanding that is super important. So that's why funding, I mean, yeah, for obvious reasons, it's super important.
Okay.
And having the builders come in and get the opportunity to get funding is very important. But what's also important is, we just talked about it. You want to grow the market. How do you get people into crypto, right? And for us, what we're focusing on, also, it's also one of the on our roadmap, something that's very important to us is how can we make the experience feel like you're not even using crypto, right? It will take time. This is not something you do overnight, but it's something where you basically start implementing basically the crypto alternative to traditional finance, right? So, okay, fiat on and off ramps is a big topic, right? What does that mean? How do I, if I have US dollars in my bank account, how can I then use those US dollars on Polimec, right? Or then, you know, swap them to something and use them on Polimec, right? This sounds boring, but it's super important. Things like that we're working on, right? It's things like, hey, I don't feel comfortable investing in something that I don't know or using a platform that I don't know in an ecosystem that in the media is portrayed as not safe, a lot of scams, a lot of money gets lost, and I need even to take care of my own keys, like, ooh, I'm scared, right? So that's mostly people that go, as mentioned in the beginning, to intermediaries because they know, like, I have a custodian, I have a broker, they're going to handle it, right? So we're looking into how can we attract those people, right, to then be basically on Polimec. And on the other side, obviously, you know, KYC credentials, as we mentioned before, we all come from traditional finance in the team, or a lot of us. I'm Swiss. Like the first word I said when I was born was like regulatory compliance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this has been instilled in our brain, and it's super important because it means that whatever you do on Polimec, you only can do it, or except for staking and governance, you can only do it if you have this KYC credential, right? Which we can go into a bit after, but it basically allows you to act in regulatory compliance, which means that no regulator will ever, well, it means that it's, how should I put this? If you do something stupid that you should not be doing, it holds you accountable. But on the other hand, it opens a lot of doors to make your experience much better. Let me elaborate on that a bit very shortly. But for example, one of the big visions I have is I want to close the entire cycle of, hey, I have money on the bank account. I want to participate in early stage fundraising in crypto projects. And at some point, I want to get that money back on my bank account because I made profit from it. Right now, this is a huge hassle. Good luck, right?
From an
So
accounting
closing
point of
this
view,
circle,
certainly. Yeah.
yeah, but that's a reality, right? I mean, you can be a crypto billionaire. Where do you pay with crypto? You can go here in Switzerland, you can buy a lot of stuff. You can, I think they even sold the house, but like, you know, currently it's not yet established as far. And I think understanding that is super important. And for us, it's important to provide this experience because it means a lot of people get much more comfortable. It's a nice entry from Web 2 into Web 3, right? So yeah, sorry, I got lost.
No, brilliant. No, I really like that. There needs to be this kind of familiarity with Web3. You know, I think still at the moment and you've got projects like yourself that are breaking down a lot of those barriers. It's quite daunting for a lot of people, even when I talk to people about setting wallets up, and I've done it for most of my family members, and I hold their private keys. And they're happy. They're really happy about that because they don't want the responsibility. You know, they obviously trust me enough, but you know, there needs to be this familiarity with. If it's too complex, people just won't do it. You know, and I've found that
they don't trust themselves.
Yeah,
that's the thing,
and that's a big problem. So there needs to be this kind of easing people into it without realizing that, like when we get in a car in the morning or when I, go drive somewhere, I don't sit there and think, okay, how does this car work? What's the engine doing right now? I just get in it and drive. You know, I don't know anything about the mechanics of it, or I might know a little bit, but I don't. You know, it doesn't phase me. And I think people using Web3 or crypto needs to be much the same experience. They need to be using it without actually realizing that they're using it, but understanding the benefits that it gives them, and obviously benefiting from that. You mentioned KYC and KML. Let's talk about this because this is really important, certainly given what you guys are doing in regards to fundraising. Because we've seen crypto projects fundraise in all different manners. Oftentimes, they found themselves on the wrong side of the law. And even today, we see a lot of those issues in regards to IPOs or ICOs in the case of crypto coming back to haunt them. So I love how Polymec's kind of implemented an actual regulatory compliant way of doing all this, which of course involves KYC and KML. So if I want to use Polymec, I need to go through this process. But that not only actually protects the investor, it also protects the project, and it's a very important thing. So could we maybe elaborate on the KYC aspect of all this and how that works?
Sure. I mean, for everyone that doesn't know, KYC stands for Know Your Customer.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have a bank account, for example, I know some people might not, they're off bank, that's fine. But at some point you probably had, it means you need to do an onboarding, which means what's your name, where are you from, what's your birth date, your ID, just basic information, right? That's so that they know this is our client. We know our client, right? And if our client ever does something that he's not supposed to do, the regulator or the law in general can intervene, right? Because again, if you like it or not, we are all bound by laws. Very important. There's this quote: "Laws are the only thing that distinguish the man from mammals, right, or from animals." And that's a very important process. But on the other hand, it's also, hey, it's my personal data. And in recent years, or with the upcoming of Facebook and all those guys, data is worth a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Not only is it worth a lot of money, but it's also dangerous, right? If you have my personal data, nowadays you probably can create an AI clone of me, and then just post some YouTube videos and talk about some stuff, right? Why not? That's possible, right? There's a lot of fraud being done, right? Credit card fraud, identity fraud. So it's a big topic about how do I identify myself to someone else. And if you talk about investing, this is very important because there's a couple topics. One of them is jurisdiction. Depending where you are operating under the laws of where you are, right? Of your jurisdiction. Certain jurisdictions allow certain things, others don't, right? So, for example, the US is a big topic where it's very difficult to get US investors, right? Because usually don't want that, because then it puts an eye. Basically, the SEC is like, oh, so you allow US investors? Yeah. Let me knock at your door, right? Mostly not a very pleasant experience. So that's one of the things that's very important, to be able to know, like, hey, where are my investors from? And the other side is as well, if you look at sanctions lists, who should not be able to invest this money, right? I don't know if I need to go into more details there, but there are lists of people that should not be able to invest money because it's illegal, right? Because they are doing illegal things, and the proceeds most likely come from illegal activities, right? And as we know, if you look at the Madoff story, there was like this Netflix documentary. I don't know if you saw it. It's
well worth watching. Yeah.
If you look at the end, what happened? Well, a couple, like 20 years later, people are still paying back the money. This can happen in crypto as well. You invest in a project, they didn't do proper KYC, they might even do illegal things, but you're an investor, right? And now it means that, hey, you're liable, which is important, but it can also be prevented, right? Because then you can keep other people accountable. Right now, that's mostly not the case because it's anonymous, you don't know who it is, you don't have a KYC, nothing happens, right? And what we create is something that we call, in collaboration with Deloitte and Kilt protocol, it's called the KYC credential. So what does that mean? Deloitte is the largest auditing firm in the world, right? I think at least if you look at prestige, market cap, all the big metrics, right?
Yep.
And one of the big topics that they do is auditing and also KYC, right? KYC services, so identifying those people. And what we now have created is a product, again, KYC credentials, where you are able to do your KYC only with Deloitte. Well, you only need to do it once. Let's put it like this, right? You give your information, and then you basically have this KYC credential, or it's also called decentralized identifier. where it basically, this information is anchored on chain on Kilt protocol, right? This information is not public, so you cannot go on chain and just see like, oh, that's his name, right? But it's linked to your data at Deloitte. And then once you connect your wallet, which holds this KYC credential with Polimec, you are able to verify certain key data points, right? So it means like, hey, are you a US resident or not, right? And then we don't know if you're French or Italian, we don't need to know, that's the entire point. But we can verify information and basically then allow you to proceed if you tick off all the metrics that are provided by the project that is raising funds, right? So that's like this entire concept of synonymous KYC, right? Where only Deloitte has your data. Deloitte is the biggest auditing company in the world, does the biggest KYC in the world for all the biggest companies, right? Only they hold your data. No one else can know your data, but it allows you to then reuse this KYC credential for multiple use cases, right? Usually nowadays, even if you look at private sales, let's say you have four, or like, I'm not counting well, four opportunities to invest in. I'm too like excited, sorry. Then it means for every opportunity, you will need to do a KYC every time, manual work. Usually it's a small company, they raise funds, they have a lawyer, you need to send documents to the lawyer, then they check it, oh, something didn't go right, send it back, and then, oh, you need to sign it, you sign it, oh, you forgot the date, goes back, you know how it goes, right? We need to do that 4 times because you want to invest in 4 different projects, right? On Polimec, you do it once. You do it once. And then if it's 2, 5, 10, doesn't matter, right? Obviously, if the information changes, it will be updated, right? But I think this is this entire point of like, hey, you know, as a private individual, it's already annoying. But if you are a corporation, if you are an institutional player, KYC takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money because you need to involve your lawyers as well. You need to involve employees that need to fill it out, right? There's a lot of questions of like, who is the beneficial owner of the company, blah, blah, blah. Right? And if you need to do it only once, trust me, you're very happy. You're very happy. And that's this entire structure that we implemented in collaboration, which means everyone on Polimec that is using those features has this KYC credential. So also the projects raising funds and the people behind the project. So you know actually the people, right? Or let's say they are liable if something happens, right? Because the regulator, they can go knock on Deloitte's door with a court order, because that's how laws work, right?
Yep.
So we create, that's why we call it regulatory compliant DeFi. We create a decentralized synonymous system where everyone is regulatory compliant, which is something, to my knowledge, that doesn't exist yet.
I don't think so. I'm just thinking off the top of my head if I know anyone. I mean, some and Polymecs are obviously fundraising. There are Launchpads out there where all you need is a token. You don't need to anything else other than to have those tokens to get on board. But it creates the problems that you've just sort of outlined. And I do truly find it fascinating that the kind of blockchain or distributed ledgers are at the convergence of so many different industries. So you've solved kind of identity and digital identity with blockchain, that you've compounded onto solving fundraising with blockchain, that's in a broader kind of financial category. You know, it's really amazing just how a distributed ledger kind of finds itself at the forefront of so many different industries. And so it's kind of a missing piece to many puzzles. And on top of that, you know, it really sets Polimec apart in regards to the fact that everything you're doing is actually in regulatory compliance, which is kind of, if you listen to Gary Gensler, the opposite of where a lot of the space finds itself. So it kind of gives you guys this advantage, I guess, in regards to what you're doing through actually utilizing, obviously, you know, Kilt Protocol, Deloitte, and bringing the whole picture together. You know, you spoke about this kind of system. That's what you've got going, and I think that's exciting. I think that's a kind of unique selling point in regards to Polimec.
Yeah, I mean, you know, being able to get the largest auditing company in the world to commit to creating a product on chain, that's not, nobody has that. Nobody has a collaboration with Deloitte, right? Except for obviously with this collaboration, and it will not be the last one, right? So if you go further a step, Like, okay, but I already have a bank account. I have a bank account, let's say, I don't know, JP Morgan. JP Morgan also needs to do KYC AML. JP Morgan at some point could either use Deloitte KYC credentials, or they could create their own KYC credentials, which means you will be able to reuse your KYC as well, which probably also means you don't even need to do it again because you already have it. Right? So the long-term vision is huge. And if you look at Deloitte, they have a lot of very cool use cases that are rolling out, right? I think they have a very, with Exion and Hapag-Lloyd, which are like shipping, like this big shipping deal they have, where you basically track, you track basically shipments, right? And they use KYC credentials for that. Well, they call it a KYX, right? Know your cargo, which is really funny. And so the use cases are super broad, right? And kudos to Deloitte or Deloitte Switzerland and the team, shout out, to actually see this opportunity, right? And get into this space early on. Because as I mentioned before, there's so many use cases and blah, 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 but there's not a lot of people actually doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look into the broader projects, like not a lot of them are really delivering. Like they just, they keep, pushing out different EIPs and then like, oh yeah, but next year. I'm like, oh yeah, nice. Right?
Yeah.
And being able to actually have these real world use cases where it literally solves a problem now and not in 10 years. And it provides you with security and added value. That's, in my opinion, that's why I got into crypto. It's not because I want to speculate and I want to, be like, oh, we're the best, we're different, we're against the system. Like, no, it's about, hey, we have opportunity to change a lot of things. And that should be the focus, right?
How can we actually add value? Yeah. No, and I feel like Polimec's ticking off pretty much all the boxes that there are. Let's talk about where Polimec actually is right now. So let's talk about, I think we've really given quite a comprehensive, but at the same time, really broken down what Polimec is, what the various kind of moving parts to it are, how it works. Let's talk about where it is right now. So what can you currently do with Polimec and what's coming? Where's the project at?
Yeah, I mean, so if you want more information, because there's much more about how it works, we have like this knowledge hub. So dive into there. Good luck. But where we stand right now, so right now we are on our road to launch, which we initiated last year. And on our road to launch, we have different milestones that we're hitting. So the first one was actually, producing blocks, which we've ticked off last year. And then you basically, from there on, you just continue up the road, right? So we now also have governance implemented, which means Polimec itself is governed by token holders. And then sudo removal. Sudo, for those who don't know, the easiest way is it's like a master user, super user on your blockchain where you can do whatever you want, right? And if you remove the super user, you can no longer do whatever you want. Very important, because it means you cannot just create more tokens or delete tokens, right? So this also is a big step for us towards this decentralization. We had our listings, if I might say, recently, which was quite exciting. And now we are basically, at, what is it today? I don't even know.
It's the 28th of March, 2024.
Yes. And so in April, we will have the first fundraisers. So we will have the first projects that will be announced, and there will be a big marketing campaign around it. So stay tuned.
Fantastic.
But the first, basically, the full app launch, which means all the palettes, or let's say all the functionalities, will be enabled. So evaluation, then the funding rounds, the entire structures, that we have an auction round and the community round, and then also the migration, everything will be enabled, right? The process can start for the first ones to start raising funds, or start this evaluation period where then people are able to do due diligence. And I think for us, I mean, it's been almost 2 years, right? This is a huge milestone. We deliver on time. And I think that's, not really something usual in crypto. And we deliver a good product, and we're very excited. And we are very excited to also announce the first project. There will be a very distinct first one. And then after that, more will follow. I think we're talking to a bit more than 40 projects right now.
Wow.
So it will be, the funding season is starting soon, and it will be a long season. It will be an interesting season, full of opportunities, and we are super excited, to say the least, right? To be able to start solving this problem step by step. And yeah, I think that's where we are right now. Where we are going, yeah, as I mentioned, this summer will be very interesting. Obviously, we want to establish business continuity as well. All the things that I mentioned before about bringing Web 2 and Web 3 together is something we're working on to establish those products. And then, yeah, next step, obviously, at some point, EVM.
Yep.
So we are, for those that don't know, we are Polkadot parachain, which means we are connected to the Polkadot relay chain. And there's many parachains. And there's soon to be bridges, which will allow us to bridge to other ecosystems as well. So once we are able to have people participate with the USDT from ETH, from the MetaMask wallet directly on Polimec, that's going to be a big game changer for us. This is something we're working on. And once we are able to have EVM projects to actually raise funds on Polimec and have the entire distribution that is handled, basically solved, then that will be a big step for us. And then, yeah, topics like RWAs, I keep talking about the primary market.
This is what I want to ask you, actually. It sounds like we're getting ready for a Polymec summer by the sounds of it. But this is something I want to really interject, and I have to interject here. I always like to ask what the vision is. So you've spoken about a few things in regards to what's coming. EVM, that's going to be huge. So when you branch out to, Polkadot isn't all the cryptocurrency space has to offer. It's one of the best things, in my opinion, that it has to offer. But there's a broader market out there. There's a broader audience that, not everyone's in Polkadot. EVM, of course, biggest language out there. There's a lot of people involved with that. But what's the vision? So we spoke about fundraising, and I think some people will think that just relates to cryptocurrency projects. But there is a vision for Polymec where it sees things perhaps like private equities or other things like that potentially being fundraised. Am I right in saying that? Am I wrong in saying that? Maybe you could break that down a little bit more.
It's an interesting thought for sure. Maybe to just before, so we are a Polkadot parachain. We will always be on Polkadot. With the beauty of Polkadot, we don't need to go outside of the ecosystem, but we can bring other ecosystems into Polkadot, right? So that's the approach we want to make, because we believe that it allows the interoperability part, allows us to bring everyone together, and we want to give this opportunity to everyone, right? If we look at the vision, there's many ways to tell the story. For me personally, we have a serious chance to revolutionize the financial market, rather than just, again, primary market, where you have the direct issuance of the foundation or of the company to new investors, and the secondary market where they can then trade those tokens or those shares, whatever it is. It's the entire market that we want to. My belief is that we will change the entire market, in the sense of the entire market dynamic, because we set a precedent. And we start with the primary market. So as I mentioned before, this funnel, this is secondary market. Then you have this big gate right now. And then you have private equity, venture capital, angel investors, right? And we start from the back. So we start with, hey, okay, we want to be able to have all angels, retail investors to participate. Then we also want VCs obviously to come in, because you want to have this choice of choosing between who is your investor. And then at some point you start going into private equity, which is nothing else than just bigger deals, right?
Yes.
If you want to simplify it. And this is something in traditional finance that the bigger it gets, the more difficult it becomes, the more stingy and the more established it is, because the bigger the deals, the more money you can make, right? And people don't really have an incentive to change that. But there's a lot of issues, right? And I think down the road, we are set. If you look at the core of Polimec, we're a settlement layer. We're an instant settlement layer with KYC, right? On-chain, everything is on-chain, with the technical implementations of vesting, of token lock periods, right? With the ability to hold auctions, to sell, how should I say this? Raise funds. Raising funds is a private sale, right? So it's a sale in some form, and to identify those people with the KYC. Or let's say the type of person, right? So we talk about retail, professional, institutional investors. We are able to identify who is licensed, right? So if you have a license, you can trade securities. Why shouldn't you be able to do that at some point on Polymer? I don't know, right? If you
Interesting.
look at tokenization, tokenization is the same thing, right? If you look at RWAs, like, okay, real world assets, right? Not everyone understands the same term. Like, it's not tokenizing a car. For me, that's not a real world asset. It's literally just an asset. Right? If you talk about Apple shares, whatever it is, right? If you want to, on one side, bring private equity shares onto Polymec to sell to people, for example, or if you, on the other side, want to enable people in the or investors in the traditional market to participate in early stage fundraising without even having to do anything, then you can create a structure like, this AMCs, actively managed certificates. That's why you have ETFs. I keep getting questions, but who even cares about the Bitcoin ETF? I'm like, well, everyone that doesn't
Hang
want to
on.
hold a wallet,
Yeah.
everyone that wants to invest large sizes, all the institutions that from a regulatory perspective are not even allowed to do their own custody, right? That's
Do you
the
know
people that care.
something as well, just to add to that? I think a lot of people don't realize that if you look at the United States, 70% of the wealth in the United States is with people 60 years and older. That is not a demographic, and I'm sure there are anomalies in that are playing around with MetaMask and things like that, or Bitcoin wallets. So it's unbelievably important having an ETF, whether you think it's bad for the centralized, whatever you think about that, in terms of money flow and in terms of unlocking capital. I mean, and I personally believe you're going to get an Ethereum ETF this year. I think technically we're looking at things that signal that, but that's just my own hunch. It's huge. I don't know how people can put an argument against that,
Yeah, we might even get a dot ETF, right? Dot is software,
Do you
right?
know,
That's what the SEC says. So let's see.
it's very interesting actually, because you have a number of, to maybe induce a little bit of speculation, you actually have a number of people that facilitate the Bitcoin spot ETFs that also offer dot products. So you've got things like 21 Shares, you've got things like Grayscale. They actually all offer exchange traded products, and dot is one of those products that they offer. So if you look at the lineage of how things may go, speculation for now, I don't have anything massively tangible other than what I've just stated. It's not out the realms of possibility. But let's,
Yeah, a good point that you mentioned is, and which I would like to, I don't challenge it, but it's much more like, what you and I think really doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Right. So even if we believe, a Bitcoin ETF doesn't make sense, it really doesn't matter if we believe that, because the fact is it exists and there is a reason for it to exist, right? So understanding why it exists, it's much more important than agreeing with it or not, right? And I think this is also this big distinction, and this goes back to what I said in the beginning. We in crypto have the audacity to dare, to challenge, to move, to just do stuff, right? Which is great because it brings innovation. That's why we have such a high speed, right? But then it clashes with, but there's also this other world of like, that runs the world.
Yep.
And since I come from this world and I understand both worlds very well and I like them both, I think it's important to understand that they can both benefit from each other. And I think a lot of people do. A lot of people don't know how to do it, right? I mean, there's this big discussion about business development in the polkadot ecosystem. Everyone says, we don't have any BD, and we need to now, create BD now. We need it now. When BD, right? And and let's hire a lot of people and just let them do BD. Which they don't understand is a lot of BD is being done in the background.
Yep.
And BD is not, it's in one side it's sales, but it's also about how do you align interests and incentives with other parties? How can we help each other? How can we create, again, the best of both worlds to come together and solve a problem for either of them, right? Or for both of them, ideally. And this is I see a lot of those things happening, and it's also dependent on obviously regulations and everything, and markets and interest rates, and let's not even go down that road. But a lot of cool things are coming, and yeah, Polymec. You said Polymec summer. I say fundraising summer will be a very big step for us. It will be a very big step for us. It will be it will not change the world, but it is the first step, and it will be huge for us, for our ecosystem, beyond our ecosystem, and it will give people a choice. And that's really what we're about. It's about, you can choose to get to use this opportunity or not, and you choose as a startup what you want to be in the future and how you want to do it, right? And this choice, even just the idea of this choice, gives a lot of freedom. And that's this freedom of being able to build, being able to focus on what you're good at, not having to raise funds, not being worried about, an investor not answering you after 5 emails, right? It's about, hey, we have an opportunity here. We can get this opportunity. If the community decides we're good to go, then you're good to go. If not, maybe you need to reflect. Maybe you're on the wrong path. Maybe you're too soon. Maybe you're too late. It gives you insight, right? It gives you direct feedback from the market before you even launch, which is great. So we're here to change a lot of things, but we want to do it step by step in a Swiss way, like a Swiss watch, delivering on time and being very thorough. And I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, me
Sorry,
neither.
it's a huge monologue.
No. Get ready for fundraising summer. I'm very excited personally, and I think I love talking to different projects that are doing different things and showcasing just how much of a hold this space, call it crypto, call it the distributed ledger space, call it whatever you want to call it, is actually taking on the entire world, and how it's breaking down barriers, how it's creating entirely new markets, how it's transforming markets. And I think Polimec is nothing short of a great example of that. Flavio, it has honestly been an absolute pleasure to have you on. The last thing really that I want to do is just ask you where people can find out more about Polimec. We're going to leave links in the description, but where can people, surely people are going to be very interested after this talk, where can people go and really find out a lot more?
Well, first of all, it was my pleasure. I had a lot of fun on this discussion, even if sometimes I get lost in my thoughts and
No.
keep going. Really appreciate the opportunity also to be on the show. So where you can find us, well, the easiest step is to go to polymec.org, which is our website. Then you can also go to app.polymec.org, which is our app, which you can see our staking application, our governance, and then also very soon discover the projects. You can follow us on Twitter, which is at Polimec Protocol. So I think that's the most important things. Then we also have a Telegram group. You will find all the information on Twitter and on www.polymec.org. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to me. You will find me on Twitter. It's quite easy. I'm always posting a lot of stuff. So yeah, I think that's if you get in touch, if you want to raise funds, let us know. If you're in the ecosystem, if you want to be part of those opportunities, also let us know. Happy to help.
Yeah, we'll leave links to all of that in the description. Flavio, it's been an absolute pleasure. Honestly, thank you very much from myself and my
Thank you, sir.
community. Pleasure. Thank you.